I'm just hitting the record. There we go. Welcome to our Friday night class. And thank you everyone for being here with us tonight. It's always great to see you guys. Tonight we have a really a fun class, and it's a little different. We do have a demo. I'm going to show making this bracelet, which also can be a necklace. So it's just a really fun design that I felt like demonstrated some of the concepts for getting bracelet sizing right, which can be super challenging. And since I struggled with it, I thought, well, let's do a class and we can all just talk through it, work through a demo. And so the way I was thinking I'll structure class tonight is I'll do an intro with just talking a little bit about bracelet sizing in general. So stuff to consider, some of the pitfalls that I've run into. I'll show you some returns that I've gotten from my shop. And then we'll move on to the demo. And so the demo, I'll show you guys making a 3-wrap bracelet. It's the one in our handout. And then at the end, if you want to stick around for the end, if you are someone who sells your work online, I'm going to talk about what I do in my shop currently to help me get sizing right for my customers when I'm selling my work. And so that's pretty much how we'll structure it. I'm going to start with the discussion, and then I'll show the materials before the demo. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and switch down to well, this is the board that we're going to be using today to do the bracelet sizing. And I'm going to grab my notes really quick, make sure I cover. There's so much detail to cover today. But so measuring the length of a bracelet, well, measured how? The first thing that will come up is most people will try to measure it flat. So they'll get their tape measure and they'll put it on their wrist and they'll go to see what their size is, and they'll tell you that measurement, right? Well, there's a couple things wrong with that. That's not only did they measure tight, but they didn't take into account what size beads am I using. And so different size beads can give you a different measurement if you measure it flat in a straight line. So that's something to think about is how tight did you measure? If they did measure tight, you want to add about a 1/2 inch. And then if you're using larger beads, that can make a difference in your measurement. And so that's where this design board comes in with helping a lot, because it's got a kind of a recessed, measurement section in it that can help the beads settle down. The reason that you get a different measurement, and I was thinking I would do a sketch. I actually got a marker out. And so you've done your tight measurement on your wrist. But then when you put on the beads, if you strung the beads just like that, sure, they'd fit. But what you're really going to do on the wrist is you're going to run above it. And your beads are sitting like this, right? And so your measurement needs to be bigger than your tight flat measurement. And the only exception there would be something like a flat Delica bracelet. So something flat that isn't too wide. You can go closer on a design like that to the skin. So all of these things come into play, and it makes it super complicated to figure out what's my dimension? What do I need to do here? So another thing just to throw even another complicated thing out there is the type of closure. So some closures need more space than others. And I was going to show our sample tonight to give you an example. So when you're measuring a wrap bracelet, for example, so somebody wearing it is going to wear it over here. The button will snuggle up next to that knot. But when they're trying to put it on, they're going to be working over here. And depending on the size of your button, there's maybe 1/2 inch or at least 1/4 inch of play that you need to add to that length, or the person's not going to be able to button it. The same can sometimes be true for a toggle if you're working with a toggle. Another thing to think about is overlaying. So when you're overlaying a bracelet, and this one, I have been caught out by this one a couple of times, but when you're going to overlay something, not only does it need to cross itself a couple of times, that's going to take up a little bit of space. I think depending on your bead size, maybe 1/4 inch each time it goes over. But also it's going to be worn at different places on the wrist. So row 1 is going to be your measurement that you would probably purchase your bracelet to. Row 2 is going to need to be a little bit bigger, and row 3 bigger still. And so that's where width comes in. And width is my number 5, is wide cuffs. Wide cuffs are really, really difficult to measure. And one of the problems with measuring a wide cuff is you might need a cone shape to do it. And that's the only thing the design board doesn't do extremely well, but you can always account for that when you are doing your design. So some returns that I've gotten in my shop. So I've got 2 returns here. Both of them I fell through the same pitfall. I made them to the measurement that they gave me. Then we talked about, did you measure it tight? I added a 1/2 inch for that. I thought I had it all figured out. I even thought about, oh, they've got to get the toggle done. They've got to get the button done. But what I didn't think about was this measurement and this measurement are going to be different. So it would probably fit if it was that wide. But when you make it this wide, you need to make it the measurement of the person's wrist up a little higher, or add something to account for that. And that's where it gets a little complicated. And I find that it really just helps to add, if you're going to do something wide, throw a 1/2 inch on it from what you would otherwise make it. Here's another return I got. This one was made the exact length and everything, but because it's a stiff design that kind of holds its shape, it was too difficult to clasp. So even though it's the right size, I even accounted for the fact that it's a raised design. You know, it's the equivalent of about an 8mm bead in height. I did all that, but because it's so very stiff, it didn't work out for my customer. It got sent back to me. So all those things are, when you're dealing with something that has a formed shape or is wide, go ahead and add a 1/2 inch to that from what you think you might need it to be. And then last but not least, I was going to do a quick demo just to talk more about different bead sizes. So these 2 bracelets, one is 4mm and this one is a 10mm bead. And I made each of these the same length, exactly the same there. Now I'm going to clasp them. Get this other one, and this is where the design board has saved me so many times. Because if I was to make those just by measuring them out, there's 7 inches. It's too big. That one, 7.5 inches. Same length laid out flat. So we really got to think about, well, am I using a 10mm? This is an extreme example because they're quite disparate from each other, but usually you get something in the noise of about a 1/4 inch, just enough to make it uncomfortable to clasp or more difficult in some way. And so that's in a nutshell everything I wanted to cover there. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in for that. And I'll start grabbing, I'm going to start grabbing materials to show you guys what we're going to use for our demo. So these are some really pretty semi-precious beads that I got on the Strand wall. And what I did in this design is I just kind of went crazy with different sizes and lays. And I spaced every bead with a size 10 Czech seed bead in my favorite color, which is this iris. It's a earthy brown iris color. And this has an advantage of making it flexible. Because, you know, if you put beads next to each other without a spacer, they tend to, they'll be stiffer. Then they'll handle more like this does, right? So the seed beads are key for stringing, I think. I almost always put a seed bead on my strung designs. And I'm using the 19 strand wire, and I'm using a pretty silver color. It doesn't matter, whatever color you like will work great. And I've got a button. And the reason I wanted to demo this is, for me, this is the most challenging type of closure, for the reason I was showing earlier, the fact that it's worn at a different measurement than it's clasped. It's worn over here, but it's clasped over here. So we need to give that, I guess what I call it, I tend to call it play. We need to give it some play or some room to maneuver when we're putting it on. So we'll talk about that in the demo. And then crimps, using some regular number 2 crimps. And that's it for materials. For tools, or one more material, sorry. We do need to have a findings pack just to get our jump rings. And we won't be using classes today, but this is where I'm pulling my jump rings from. And then for tools, we'll need some flush cutters to cut the wire. And we'll need the usual suite of the flat chain nose and bent nose. I like to use those for jump rings. And let's see, we'll need a crimper. So it's your basic crimper, just the standard size. It's not the micro or the macro. It's just the one in the middle. And that's all the stuff. And so diving into the handout, it talks about working from the spool. I do that most of the time, with the exception of if my spool is running really low. Now, I've got a new spool today, but earlier today when I was making those samples I just showed, I was working with a really not enough on there to stay on the spool and have enough to work with. So if you're in that situation, a stopper, some Scotch tape, or go ahead and just crimp one of your ends. If you'd like to crimp an end early, that's not going to hurt anything. And in my case, I think what I'm going to do is just pull out as much as I think I need at the moment. And I'm going to put my clip back on. And again, if that doesn't work for you, if you've got too little, just go ahead and you can throw a crimp on the end or a bead stopper. And I'm going to start with my button side, but I'm not putting on my button just yet. So the thing about buttons and why I'm going to put extra, I'm going to put 4 beads to start. And again, that's just so it has room to get through the button loop. Now, if you're doing a different kind of class, you don't have to do this part. You can just start stringing your bead. But just consider if you are doing a button to give it some air there. So that's going to look like on this design is just 4 out of these size 10s. I'm going to bring those down. And I'm just going to randomly string. I don't have a lot of small beads left on this strand, so I might cut my new one. But looks like I've got enough to start. And my mat's getting brighter. The sun's coming out. All right, so I'm going to just string a little bit here. And I'm going to keep going until I have a length that I feel is worth measuring on my board. So just getting going. I'm kind of eyeballing it. And I'm working with a lot of strings, so I'm going to come up a little bit here. And then another thought I'm having as I work with this is I am working with a brand new spool. And sometimes it's kind of bent a little bit. And stringing, I love needles for stringing, but if I don't have a design where I can work with my needle, here's my flush cutters. I'm going to just trim a little bit. I'm holding these cuts. And that might make it a little easier for me to get it through there. Yeah, that's going to help. So speed stringing, my first wrap, I'm just going to do all beads. I'm not going to try to bring the leaves in. And oh, forgive me if I didn't introduce when I showed the beads earlier. I might not have shown the checkbox leaves. I think I forgot to do that. They were sitting up here. They are combined with this and the seed beads, what we're using today. And I tried to make my focal on my second wrap. So one wrap goes around, and then I'm going to try to make those centered on the top of the wrist. And I'll show you guys how the design board helped me do that. So there's one. And I think I did a pretty pattern when I was stringing my original design. I did like kind of like an up, down, up, down. I'm being more random with this one. It's quiet out there. It's quiet in my house too, which is unusual. Like, where's everyone? Okay, almost getting there. And so with this design, I already know what my clasp is going to take up as far as length. But if you were working with a new clasp style or a new button or a new toggle and you weren't quite sure, there is one trick to that to figure it out. You can string us like a test sample. And so sometimes what I do is create, kind of like to take the guesswork out of it. So what I would do is I'd grab my button. These buttons have a cool little like attachment on there. It's neat. And I'll just lay that. And then I'm gonna lay it like this because I know I need clasping room, right? And then measure. And this is a flat measurement, so I'm gonna be generous with my measurement. I'm gonna say a little bit over 1.5. So I'm not gonna string the full length for this. And I think for this demo, I'm gonna just do a 6-inch bracelet. So I'm only gonna give this a little less than that. We're gonna go for like 4.5. And I'm gonna bring the board over now because I think we're getting close. So, all right. So going for this size here. And I just saw that I might actually already be there. But just in case, bring this over. You could even string this too in the beginning. I didn't do that, and I don't want to cut yet, but if I had, that can also help a little bit. There's going to be a crimp on there, and there's going to be a loop above that crimp. So I'm going to set this in front of those seed beads to account for that. I'll lay this on top toward the middle and then see where I'm at. So with the crimping, that's going to be pretty good. So that's my spot 1. Okay, now I need to remember this spot because next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a full 6-inch around, but I'm going to try to center my leaves. I want to remember this spot. So a couple ways you can do that. You can put a marker, you can put a jump ring, and that kind of tends to be what I like to do because then you can just take that off at the end. And because it's a seed bead, your jump ring is going to sit on top of your seed bead and it's not going to get in the way of your measuring. So I'm going to throw my jump ring on here so I know my marker point for wrap 1. And then when I'm done with this bracelet, I'm just going to get my pliers and take that off. All right, so let's make 6 inches here. And at some point, I'm going to want to put my leaves on. So I'm going to want to go to about here. So just feeling it out. I'm just feeling it out to see, well, how can I get, and you'll end up, I do end up having to pull them off sometimes. And if it's not perfect the first time I try it. It's a little easier to do just one focal, I feel like, because if it's off by a little, millimeter or so, you're not going to worry too much about that. But when it's something that you're trying to fan, like these leaves, it's probably the most tricky thing. But let's try. Let's see how we do. Oops, I forgot my seed bead, or it didn't quite make it on there. All right. Another thing about this design that makes it, hard to measure is that I'm just going crazy with beads. I'm using all these different sizes and just throwing them on there. So if I tried to do a flat measure with this, it would be tricky to get right. And chase the beads around here.
Danielle, while you're stringing,
Uh-huh.
would you mind answering again what was the reason for the jump ring?
Sure. Yeah. So when I did my first layup, I guess you could call it, I determined my clasp and where it's going to sit and how much room I had. And I decided the clasp is going to take about 1.5 inches, roughly. And so I left that blank there. And the jump ring is showing me now I'm starting wrap 2. So that was wrap, this from the jump ring to here is wrap 1 with some space left for my clasp. And now this is going to be wrap number 2. This certainly is not the only way to do this. This was just something that, you know, that I came up with. Lots of other ways will work, but I find myself using a marker. It's kind of like I used to use stitch markers when I did crochet, and it's a habit that's stuck.
Danielle, someone else just said that in the sidebar. It's just like a stitch marker. So
Yeah.
the crocheters understood the reason why you did it right away. So thank you for just, before you went too much further, I wanted to make sure they understood why you did the marker. Thank you.
Oh yeah, for sure. No problem. And so I'm looking at this now, and well, we could start putting leaves on. It depends how many we want to put on. But before I put the leaves on, I want to explain what I'm doing here with this next round. Notice where I'm putting it. I'm laying it on top of the other one, but also to the right of it, or the left if I'm reversed. I'm not sure if I'm reversed for you guys, but it's just to the side. And the reason I'm doing that is for that reason I was explaining earlier. Wrap 1 is going to go here. Wrap 2 is going to be a little higher on my wrist. So it's going to need more room because our wrists get bigger as we go up our arm. So I'm going to make this one sit in front of that one and go all the way around. And that's why I love this board, because it just takes the math out of it for me. It makes it a lot easier for me to figure out. So I'm going to I'm working with a little bit less real estate than I usually do. I'm going to move over my seed beads so you guys can see them. Let me get the leaves out. Let's get our leaves. And let's see. This strand, when I purchased the strand, there was actually 2 hanging on it. And I've got both of my samples out of that first strand. So I'm working from that second one now. Okay, so I'm just going to pull a few off here. There's also these really cute little bugles on that strand. Save those because I've been playing with them. I'm making something with them now. We might use those later. So just set those aside. Okay. And I'm going to go seed bead first. I forgot my seed bead. Let's get this leaf on here. And yeah, that's going to be really cute. And what I did on the original was I did an interest bead in between each one. So sticking with that convention here, I think we'll get about 5 around. Now, if it doesn't work out when I get over here, if we look at it and we feel like, you know what, that doesn't look right, it's not centered, we'll take it off and we'll add another bead over here. So let's just play, or we'll take a bead off if we need to. But this is just kind of, you know, we're just feeling out the design. And it doesn't matter if your leaves are facing the same way, but I'm going to be making them the same direction. Just, I don't know. My house is really messy right now, so I'm making everything very organized to compensate for it. So I think that's showing in all of my designs right now. For real. They're all symmetrical. And there's another leaf. Okay, so where are we? That's not bad. That's not bad. It's got 3 here. Let's see what happens. I'm going to try to make that a smaller bead, and that's going to be the middle. Okay, small bead. Mini bead. Here we go. Yeah, I think this is going to work, but I'm not calling victory just yet. And yeah, so there's 3, we have 2 more over here. And I think that's going to line up okay. One more. Yeah, okay. Okay, what do you guys think? Does it look centered to you? I feel like it's okay. Because that's how it's going to look when it's on. This will be on top of that one, but it will be, yeah, so that's going to work out good. So now I'm just going to string all the way to here, and I'm going to put another marker. Because remember, this is where our button is going to start here. So I'm going to go all the way to there. And I just need to give myself a little more room on my wire. So I'm sliding down. Here we go. Okay. So let's move that for just a minute. I tend to kind of go back and forth. This is going to be a little bit of stringing. Let's go to a big bead. I was really drawn to these green with this like pop of pink color bead when I saw it. And the first thing I thought of was I'm going to put the iris beads with that, with these ones. Actually, kind of my go-to when I'm stringing like this is this one or the black diamond, because it just looks like a knot. Ooh, I put 2 there, sorry. And the black diamond color, it's very close, but it goes better with grays. And we did that on our stash busters, our stash buster necklaces that we did. I think that was, gasp, I think that was 2 months ago now. Time is going really fast. That was a while. All right, I might need to measure again. And of course, this is, this is the slow and careful way to do it. But once you have this design sketched out, you'd be able to remake it really fast. You wouldn't have to go through all of this, repeatedly. This is just, first time designing something. Okay, so there's our wrap one. My stitch marker is hard to see, but it's right there. I'll try to make it centered. And here comes our wrap 2. And I'm almost there. All right, so one small bead, and then I'm going to put my stitch marker on. I think that'll do it. We were joking before class if this would take 20 minutes or more, and I've lost track of time, so I have no clue, but kind of a fun one. Okay, so now I just need to do another super simple wrap. But this next one, it's going to have to roll on top of the one I've just made. So let's just put it back on there for 1 second so I can explain that. And another thing just to make sure is when you are, when you decide where what the front is, I tend to make this the center, the front, but just stay consistent with that if you are working with a focal that you wanted to center. If you're not working with a focal, you don't have to worry about that at all. But I need to kind of remember what I did before. So I had it a bit like that. All right, so we're gonna go around, and did that work out? I probably could have done a big bead actually. And I'm thinking I will swap that, or just maybe add one more. Let's do, One of these is good. Okay, so there's wrap 2. I feel good about wrap 2. So now I'm going to do one more wrap. And because of my leaves being in the way, it's going to be a little hard. So I'm just going to do this. Just going to fold them in. Get those out of the way. And we're going to lay our final layer just around it. So I'm going to just start stringing really quickly here. All right. This last one is going to take more beads than the ones that that we did before, but that's, you know, that's what we expected, right?
Danielle, I'm just checking. Did you put another marker in?
Uh-oh. No, I did not. That's okay. Thank you for noticing that.
Wasn't me, was one of your great students.
You guys are good. You guys are keeping me on my toes. Let me grab one of these here. I'm gonna try to put it on while it's there. Because I don't want to unstring my string. All right, let's open this up. I want to mark right here. You guys are awesome. That would have been really lame if I hadn't put that on there. I mean, I'd have made it work, but yeah, much better to have it. Okay, so now I need to get to there. I think I'm going to go with like my bigger beads on this one. And when we finish this, I'm going to do, we've got this closure here ready to go, but I'm going to remake another one and I'm going to make it adjustable so that I can wear this one because this one's just a tad small for me. Okay. It's getting there. And the other cool thing about this is if you had to leave your work for a little while and go do something else and come back to it, it holds it all in place for you. It's kind of nice. I would recommend putting a little stopper on your end if you're going to walk away from it, just in case, you know, it gets knocked over. I accidentally put 2 C beads there, but I'm going to live with it because I don't want to unstring it. Okay, just a little bit more. So sometimes I look at, you know, like the designer magazines for, you know, just fashion jewelry. And one of the trends that I've been seeing lately is nuggets with little beads in between. So how perfect, seed beads with these nuggets. And that trend is really cute. Even like as a choker necklace or it's summer now, so anklets, it's anklet season. I keep picking up this bead and putting it back down. I'm gonna go for this one here. Okay. Oh, getting close right here. Okay, so I think 3 more. I go with 3 more. All right. So right about there. And I'm gonna give one more small bead. It's got a little tiny bit of space there. And so on this design, we started with seed beads, so you could end with seed beads if you'd like to. But it looks like that's what I did here. But if you're wanting to pass your wire back through a bead before you trim it, you can leave the seed bead off. It'll be a little easier to get. I kind of had to play with it a little bit to get my wire through. It's possible, but you have to really play with it. If it's easier just leaving that seed bead, you can leave that seed bead off. You can get the wire through it when you come back on that pass from the crimps. So let's get our crimps. And I'm going to crimp this side first. So in order to do that, I'm going to need a jump ring. I'm going to grab my jump rings. I just set them somewhere in front of me. Here we go. I'm going to use one of the bigger jump rings. I'm not sure if this is I think this is actually the large one. I've got mediums in there somewhere, but I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to make sure it's closed. And then we're going to tie our suede to it at the end. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Crimp bead. Get an extra one there. All right. And so I am just throwing it on this end. This is the side that's going to have my my suede. And bring that down. And crimper. And so there's very good classes out there that have already been taught on crimping. So I'm just going to just breeze through it really quick. If you want to get more detail about crimping, a lot of the classes by Meredith for Beadalon talk in great detail about how to do this properly. But in quick summary, I'm going to crimp to make it round. I'm going to use the first part of the tool, and that's new for me. I didn't realize that helped, but the first part of the tool to round the crimp, the back to compress it into a U shape, and the front again to fold the U. And I'm making sure that I haven't crossed my wires in there. So there's the front. And switching to the back, I made a little U shape there. And I'm going to fold the U. And so this is the part where getting that last seed bead through can be a little tricky, but I didn't put one on. So my wire is going to go right through. And I'm going to trim that now. So getting my flush cutters, I'm going to trim that tail. And that's pretty good. Okay, so let's bring the bracelet down to meet that. All the way to the end there. And come back to the top. And I'm going to find my button. My button is here. The other crimp that I had out is right here. Let's put some air on it. And I'm going to get my crimp, the button here. And now I'm going to try to go through my seed beads. It's possible. This is the 0.015 that I'm using here. I've been able to get 0.019 through on occasion. It depends. I just kind of play with it and see, but I think this is going to be okay. And if it doesn't work, I'll just trim it above the crimp. But look, yeah, it's going. So yeah, just test that out and see what your beading wire and your seed beads are doing and see if that works. But I was able to get through all of them. So I'm just tightening it down. Leave a good amount of air here. The air, this loop here that is attaching your button. Let it move very freely before you do your crimp. And then let's also make sure I don't have any gaps. Just looking down here to see if I have gaps. And I don't. But if you wanted to be doubly sure, just do, and this is also helpful if you weren't using spacers to make sure you're leaving enough air on your wire, but it's looking like it'll work just fine there. Okay, crimping bravely. Here we go. Careful not to break your seed bead. I've done that too. All right, there's my U shape. This is where I always break my seed bead, right there. And I'm good. So time to trim that. Okay. So we've got our bracelet here. Now we just need our suede ending. I'm gonna move this, oops. Oh, move this out of the way really quick. And grab the suede. And I took the top color off. I don't remember what that was on here. It was really pretty. I must have loved it and used it all up. But my second favorite is this gorgeous olive color. And let's make it adjustable. So in the handout, it says to cut 10 inches. 10 inches was perfect for getting one of these done. I want to do two. So I don't quite need to double it, but I'm going to go a little higher. So let's do like, I don't know. I'm going to add an extra 5 inches or so. I'm just eyeballing that there, but okay. And so go ahead and bring your suede through your jump ring and find the midpoint. I cut way too much suede. But when you start knotting, I find it's helpful to have extra. So I usually don't sweat that. And you can always save those little scraps and make tassels with them. So no worries there. Fold them over your fingers and cross it. And then just bring that tail through. That's both strands coming through here. And I'm just going to work my knot down as close as I can to the jump ring without encapsulating it. And it should move pretty freely before we tighten it. So that looks pretty good. And so to tighten this now, I'm going to pinch it right here. I'm going to pull these strands one at a time. So one, and then two. And then you can pull them apart. And now I need my button to come over here and measure. And leave some room. I don't know if earlier when you guys saw me trying to clasp and unclasp this, I just did that a little too tight. And so I'm going to try to make mine a little bigger than this time. I'm going to try to put my knot right about here. So I'm just trying to remember that spot and I'm just pinching it. Let's see. Okay, I like it. Pulling one, pulling two, and then I'm going to test it before I go any further. Okay, that's working out. One more, just like it. About there. Okay. Bring it down. And I made that a little wider, but that'll still work out great. It's a very tall button, so it's kind of handy to. And then if you want, you can trim your ends to look pretty. So either scissors or flush cutters will both work really nicely. I'll probably use my scissors. I'm going to go at an angle. Actually, flush cutters might be better in this case. Yeah, way better. And so that just gives it a little bit of style, some flair to it. And there's our bracelet. So I'm going to try this on. I usually need about a 6.5, 6.25, depending on the style. So I'm just going to see, center that. I'll probably need to use the adjustable part. And there we go. So actually it's a little bit bigger than I'd expected, but yeah, so it's centered there.
Danielle,
Yeah.
my wrist is a lot bigger than yours, so I think it will fit me.
I'll send it to you. I think I might have added a little more beads on the beginning there. But yep, so that's just kind of like a crash course on the design board and some of the possibilities, this is a good segue into if you were going to sell this bracelet. Number one, it's adjustable. So that gives you a little bit more, it gives you one extra customer out there. So if they don't mind that it's adjustable, or perhaps they're buying it for someone and they don't know their wrist size, that can be kind of helpful. And so in my shop, what I do is when I'm selling a bracelet, I'll tell somebody the size in writing in the description, but then I'll also take a picture of that bracelet on this board. And that is actually in my listing. So if you browse through a listing, you'll see a very glamorous photo of it. And it's laid out. It's on a pretty background with flowers. And that's great. That's the eye catcher. That gets people to come and look at that piece. But then you want to make sure when they get the piece that they're happy. And that's the tricky part. So then you gotta be very clear with people about sizing. So sometimes what I'll tell people is go get a bracelet you really like and measure it. And if they come back and they've gotten a chain and I'm selling them a bracelet with 10mm beads, I'm going to try to adjust for that. Or I might ask them, do you have a bigger bracelet or a chunkier bracelet that you can measure? If they are ordering something just like this, it's a lot easier because you can approximate from their measurement a lot better. But what they're going to do is they're going to send you a picture of a ruler and they're going to lay their bracelet next to the ruler. And you're going to have to figure it out from that. And so that's where this really helps. They're telling you, hey, this bracelet fits me. I like this bracelet, and here's what it looks like on a ruler. And so you'll know from this that you need to add about 1/2 inch, depending on how big the beads are. And if they can get a bracelet that kind of more closely approximates that bead size, it will help you get that measurement right. Then also just laying out. So if you're going to decide, say you're making a listing and you're going to make, I don't know, 2 of every size. That way somebody ordering can just use the little drop-down menu and choose, hey, I want a 6.5 inch wrist, or I want it to be adjustable. So how I do it is I'll make these standard sizes, and then I will have an option, and that person can select the option that I'd like it to be adjustable. So they can say, hey, I want that 6.5, but I want it adjustable or not. And so there's in the platform that I'm using to sell, there is the option to offer that to a customer. So they can select 2 different options on the same listing. So that's how I do that. And then of course I've got photos of it shown on this board. And I'd love to say that that's been foolproof for me. It is 90% of the time. But I do still get returns for bracelet sizing. So I wanted to make sure I threw out there that give yourself some grace. Do not be hard on yourself. This is very challenging stuff, and it's hard to get right. The big companies out there take returns, no questions, and we have to do the same. People don't always know when they're ordering it if it's what they want. So sometimes there's that as well. And then just one other quick thing to talk about before we end is I wanted to show a bracelet on the board that's this big. So this is one of my thick ones that got returned because it was too tight. And I think the reason it was too tight is because I made it for a 6.5 inch wrist person, but I didn't account for this measurement up here. So if I had it to do over, and what I ended up doing when I did do it over is I made it 7 inches for that person. So it still fit them. And because it's a thick design, when they put it on, it's gonna lay higher on the wrist anyway. And so there's just another thing to consider if you're making stitch designs that are quite wide, or if you're making, like, for example, leather wrap bracelets. go ahead and add that 1/2 inch. Don't be afraid to add that because it's, I think a customer getting a bracelet in the mail, putting it on for the first time is going to say, I love this. And if it fits them, they're going to be more likely to love it than if they can't button it. If they're struggling to button it, they're not going to like it and you're going to get it back 100% of the time. But if it's just a tad big and they love it, they're probably going to keep it. And so, yeah, that's if there's any questions.
Danielle, I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
Number one, that bracelet that you're showing, that's one of the classes that you taught us as well. It's in the Michael's recordings.
Yeah, this was a video. It was called Arctic Circles. You can find it on Michael's YouTube. They have we did 3 different colorways, and it's finished with this style. We used wire guardians on that.
And is there another bracelet that you showed earlier that was a return?
Yeah, there's this one.
This one.
This is a herringbone rope. We're doing herringbone rope in June. This is
I just wanted everyone to know, because they love that bracelet, that we are teaching that in June.
Yep, and we're going to start with, actually, that's a great segue into, let me bring out June classes really quick. I've got those here. And forgive me if I don't have the order right. I'm trying to remember what order we're showing.
Don't give the dates. We'll just say they're June classes.
June classes, yeah. And so this one is the herringbone rope. We're going to start real simple version. But you guys know how I like to build on things. So we'll start with this, and then we'll have another class where we'll do a more complicated version. Maybe we'll play with different size beads. And of course, I always talk to that. So we'll introduce this style. This is a super simple, beginner friendly version. And then we'll play with what other possibilities. All 3 of these are the same stitch. There's just some little minor tweaks that make them look this different, but they're the same exact stitch. And they are this stitch, just done in the round. So it's all this stuff looks incredibly complicated. It is not. It's really easy to do. And so that's one of the classes. And then one of our other classes, I think this might be the first one in June, is bugle chain. And so we're going to make some earrings. And then I think this class will be one where we have time to play and experiment with other ideas. And I'm actually going to do a fringe one where there's kind of like a row hanging on from one of those bars, where we can do like an ombre with like almost like a little beaded curtain, really statement earring. But I just wanted to play with some bugles and show a really cool way you can make a unique chain. This works up so fast. So it's a great way to make a chain for lots of different applications. And then for those crocheters out there, we're going to do some crochet. And I'm excited for this one. I think it's quite easy. And this is the chain stitch with beads. And that's all it is. And then I wanted to throw a little interest into this one. And so what I did was I wanted to see what happens if I take a tube of size 6 seed beads and use them all up. And this is what happened. So this is 22 grams of size 6 seed beads right here. And it's a layer necklace. I took one of these little hooks and attached it so that we can make it layered, but it is actually all one long piece. So we'll talk about how I did that and how I finished it. The ends here. And here's a version that I did that was just a little bit shorter. This was a little less than half a tube. So lots of ways you can make that really cute. And then last but not least, we've got Super Duo cuffs. And we just talked about sizing for cuffs. So you guys will be ready to make these. These also stitch up really fast. They're really cute on. They're super easy to make. Yeah, so that's June.
Danielle, because we have you and we just have a minute or two, we had an earlier question. Have you ever had any issues with your leather shredding, or do you have any tips for when you cut it?
So with Suede has a little bit of a life on it. You'll end up replacing it if you wear that bracelet a lot. You'll probably want to replace it every so often. With regular leather, like leather cord, I used to make a lot of leather wrap bracelets. That was something that was like a bestseller in my shop for a long time. And with those, the wear points where the buttons are, they certainly did wear. Well, two things. When I make the bracelets, I was really careful not to nick them with the needle, because that's one way to start fraying your leather. And once you fray it, it's going to propagate. But the thing I noticed about leatherette bracelets, and I have had to do both repairs and reworks, and when they come back to me, that's not where they break. They break in the thread where the stitching is up here. So yeah, these wear, but they're not the first thing to break. So just something to think about.
Thanks, Danielle. You're getting a lot of well wishes on the sidebar and a lot of long weekend good wishes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we have our holiday coming up. I always forget holidays now. It all runs together because I used to use school as my like measure, and now since it's every day's the same, so I forget there's holidays and I forget there's Mother's Day and all of that. But thank you so much, and thank you guys for being here on your Friday night with us. And I am looking forward to seeing you guys for our next class next Friday. And have a great Memorial weekend, everyone. Bye.